Broadcast is back, baby.
Somewhat. The thing with the Steam Deck is, you can see my bed. It's right there.
Hmm.
And so it's a medium-sized trip from my bed to my PC. And then there's kind of not that much incentive to just play in my bed. There are times when I do it, and especially, or the really cool thing about the Steam Deck is that it really runs everything, except for multiplayer games, but I don't play those.
Hmm.
And so really getting to play everything, and you can even do mod stuff, all that stuff works. And doing that, just,
Really?
having it in your bed, of course, doesn't work with every game. I wouldn't want to play like strategy games on that. Even though
Hmm.
it has the trackpads, and the trackpads are really cool, that's just not what it's built for.
What
But
kind of modding you can do on the Steam Deck?
basically everything. So the Steam Workshop stuff works perfectly, of course, but you can even do all the external file changing stuff you do on Windows, because basically it installs the games like you would on Windows. So if you have like mods on the Nexus or whatever, you can just download the files, paste them in, and that all still works. It's just really cool.
That's amazing, man. That's
Yeah.
really impressive machine that Steam released. No,
Yeah.
sorry, Valve, right?
Valve, yeah, Valve.
Released, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's one of my big things with consoles. I'm a big fan of retro consoles. I just recently got a PS1 for the first time, but
The
that's
original one?
the
Or
original.
just
I've got a no. I got the original one. I put a mod chip in it as well, so I can play US games because I don't like PAL games. Because I don't know. Do you know the difference between NTSC and PAL? All that stuff.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
have a funny story about it, but go ahead.
Okay,
I tell you.
right. I'll explain for those viewers who don't know. So NTSC and PAL are basically two different standards on how you display images for your TV program or whatever. And PAL runs at 50 hertz, NTSC runs at 60 hertz. That's the biggest difference. There's some other color space, screen size differences, but those don't matter. The biggest one is the frame rate. A lot of games were developed in NTSC regions, and when they were ported over to PAL, the developers basically said, okay, that's fine, just release it like it is. And so you have games like running 12% slower, just on PAL consoles, because all the game code was time or frame rate dependent, and just they run slower. Or you have examples like the first Super Mario Brothers on the NES, which for some reason the music runs faster. No idea why it does that, but the music just constantly tries to give you a heart attack.
Just the music?
Just the music. Everything else is no. The gameplay is fine. The music is sped up and the animations are slowed down. So when you're like World 1, 2, where you have this animation of Mario going down the pipe, if you know what I mean, that one slowed down for some reason. It's wild. And the counter at the end that counts down your remaining time and adds it to your points, that one slowed down as well, as you get that fun screeching sound for like 2 or 3 seconds longer. Especially right during those old days, the ports were just insane. They didn't give a shit about releasing outs, and it was the same for like PAL games ported to NTSC. There are some NTSC games that are just unplayable because they were developed at 50 hertz, and at 60 hertz they just break, and that's not fun. That's all my consoles. You can't see them back there, but I have a ton of retro consoles, and I made an effort to just find a way to get them to 60 hertz. Like for the Mega Drive, you can just install 2 switches basically. At the back, you can just cross to, there are like 2 different pads, or 4 different pads next to this, and depending on whether they were connected or not, that determined if the console was running at 50 or 60 hertz, and if it was Japan or outside of Japan. So you can just basically install 2 switches to do it. Or for like the N64, I got a Japanese one that I also could install an RGB mod into, so I could get a better signal out of it, stuff like that. And that's a lot of effort, a lot of unnecessary effort, in my opinion. And you also can't collect PAL games, of course, in my opinion, because I mean they look good on your shelf, but I'm not someone who just buys stuff to put it on a shelf. I want to play it, and yeah, most PAL ports are just awful. That was like up to the N64 and PS1 era. Then it gets better, and the Saturn as well. The Saturn actually has mostly good ports.
What's get better?
They don't break down. They don't mess with the gameplay, because the biggest example, in my opinion, is the original Sonic the Hedgehog on the Mega Drive, Sonic the Hedgehog 1. The music runs slow, everything runs slow, the entire gameplay. And so the game changes completely because it plays completely differently if you're just running it slower. And in my opinion, it makes it completely unplayable. And it's being a retro gamer in if you actually want to play on those consoles instead of emulator, it's actually a lot more effort here in the EU.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's NTSC is for America, right?
It's America, right? And Japan has its own standards. It's NTSCJ, but it's basically the same thing. Everyone had different, because what does Brazil have? They have like PAL 60, I think.
No. It's NTSC.
They
like
also have, okay.
Yeah.
Right, but there's someone also uses PAL 60. I don't know who, but PAL 60 apparently also exists. That's some fun stuff you got to get into if you want to go into retro gaming.
And why is that? Why do we have all those differences?
Well, basically, the story is the Americans created the standard, and then the Europeans looked at that standard and decided, yeah, that's shit. We're gonna do our own thing, because the color accuracy on NTSC was actually really bad back in the day. I'm talking like the 50s, 60s, because they didn't handle their colors correctly, so you had a lot of color deviations. And us Europeans also said, okay, we want a bigger screen size, so we created PAL, which runs slower but allows for better accuracy and larger screens. Back then, it was just movies and all that stuff, so it didn't really matter. And then came consoles and computers, and suddenly everything just broke down.
André, the quality of the call is a little bit bad. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. I can still hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but it's a little bit like robotic.
I think it's getting better now.
It looks better.
Okay, good.
All right, so here in Europe, we have. Do we still do those things? Like the companies still have those differentiations, or it's something from the past?
That's a good question. I think PAL 60 is standard now. That's supported, and every TV we have comes with NTSC, so that's not an issue. So you can run American content through your TV. So I can like plug these American consoles or Japanese consoles in, no problem. That was a problem beforehand too, but not anymore. And I think more and more devices just move to NTSC because there's basically no difference. But it's a big headache if you want to get into like console gaming, that old stuff, retro stuff. It's really not fun.
No. So I have a funny story about that. I was born in Brazil, but soon after I moved to France, right?
Right.
So I had my Brazilian or American, let's say the same model, right, from NTSC, Nintendo 64. And then when I moved to France, I was like, I'm bringing a Nintendo, come on, of course.
Yeah.
And then I started buying. I started buying games. I discovered eBay back then. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I had like some money that my mom was giving me for lunch. I was just no, I'm gonna save it. I need to buy new games for my Nintendo. And I saved, and it was like, okay, now it's time. I'm gonna buy the new. It wasn't new at the time, but I wanted for my collection the James Bond.
GoldenEye.
GoldenEye.
Yeah,
I played so many
that game
hours.
is so kick-ass. Yeah, seriously, that game's awesome.
It's amazing. And I wanted for myself because I used just to play it at my friend's house.
Right.
So first thing, as I'm independent grown up, I have my lunch money. I have my Nintendo 64. I discovered eBay. I don't know how many years old I was, but I was like, okay, it's time. And then I bought it. I bought it on eBay. It took like 2 weeks to arrive, and I was like,
wow,
like eating my fingernails, waiting anxiously about it. And when it arrived, the first thing I tried to do was to put it on my console, of course, and it didn't fit. Like the cartridge would not even go in the slot.
Yep.
I was like, oh, fuck. This man sold me a fake cartridge. How dare he? And then the first thing I went to the internet and started, dude, what's wrong? Why did you sell me? This is wrong. Like, of course, they start blaming the guy, like, so stupid. And then he explained, no, I mean, this is original. He proved me that it was original. I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with the cartridge. There's something wrong. Right. There's something else wrong. And then I opened, like, I took a flashlight and looked into the slot of the Nintendo 64. I noticed that there were some like things preventing the cartridge to go in. Like they actually modified the cartridge shape. So it doesn't go in. So my first idea is, okay, I'm gonna cut off the
right.
I'm gonna cut off the cartridge and make a different shape so it can fit in, and spend like, I don't know, one entire night with this kitchen knife shaping shaping the cartridge so it could fit in. And then it finally worked. Like it went in, but nothing happened, of course. Even though, so I was like, and then we started researching about it. I was so frustrated. And then I discovered amazing universe of PAL and NTSC, and dude, it's just a headache, right, for gaming.
It's bad. The region locking especially. And it's just so annoying.
I think Nintendo 3DS doesn't have it.
The Switch doesn't have region locking. I think the 3DS still did. I'm not sure. The 3DS had a different thing though, because the 3DS for some reason introduced a system to detect those DS clone cartridges, or those 501 cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and general, not just that, they actually had a system to detect fake cartridges. So my half brother was actually the one who first bought a DS for my big sister. That's how the first DS landed in this family. And he bought the most bootleg version of New Super Mario Brothers I've ever seen. It's the case is completely square with like rough edges, and the plastic's just more or less falling off, like the plastic covering. It ran back then, but it doesn't run now. Right, stuff like that. Also reminds me of the time, your story about the N64 cartridge reminds me of the good old time when we had our DS and we tried just ramming Game Boy Color games into the cartridge slot. Because the DS had a Game Boy Advance port at the bottom, right? But it wouldn't read Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. So we actually had this. Yeah. For some reason, it didn't do that. Actually, I know why. Because the Game Boy Advance actually has like two different, not two different mainboards, but like two CPUs, I think, to route. Basically, the Game Boy Advance has another Game Boy Color built in. That's actually how they solved that. So the Game Boy Advance doesn't emulate that stuff because it doesn't really have the hardware. You can emulate some Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, but not all of them. So they actually just had parts of the Game Boy Color in there as a separate module that could read Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. And they threw that out with the DS, so it couldn't read Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. But back in my, because I grew up in our village's small school, it was like we had 4 classes with like 20 people each, so 80 people. Really small school, but we always had the school sale once a year. And there was this guy just selling pristine copies of Pokemon games back in the day. Like a pristine copy. That was like 2011, 2012, a pristine copy of Pokemon Emerald. Boxed, perfect condition. The first time I saw that, I was really into Pokemon. I think I played Heart Gold or Soul Silver came around at the time. So that was my first one that I started with. And I saw these games, but I didn't have any money. So I just cried as long as it took for like 2 hours for my mother to buy that game. And then she did. Opened the box up, no game inside. That was cool.
Who was that? Who was this person? A guy from school?
A guy just from the local village. But I told him then, okay, there's no game, and then he got it. And it was the manual all in perfect shape. The box, because the Game Boy Advance games had like these carton boxes. They weren't plastic. Of course, over the years, I ripped that up because I was a stupid child. But yeah, but they also sold like, I think Pokemon Crystal I bought at one point. And I also really wanted to play that game, tried putting it in a cartridge slot, wouldn't work, got really angry. And I lost it, which, I mean, seriously, but he was selling them for like $20 back in the day. Just imagine that.
But with no cartridge, that's an over expensive box, right?
Yeah, he just left it at home. Like he actually just said, "Oh, oops, I forgot that. I'll be right back." And I think he just rode back home on his bike, like up a mountain, back down, and like 20 minutes later he came. Oh, here's a game.
So it was not a scam. It's just
no, it was. Luckily, it wasn't a scam. No, but the battery was almost empty because those Pokemon games still had the battery thing.
I remember I used to play Pokemon Sapphire on the GBA.
Sapphire, yeah.
Man, I don't know. I have like other copies of Pokemon, but for some reason, Pokemon Sapphire would just delete my save every now and then. It was so infuriating.
Oh, okay. That shouldn't be a battery problem because I think the Crystal, Gold, and Silver were the last ones that used the battery backup save. Sapphire should actually run without a battery, just because it had this timing system, if you remember. And if the battery ran out, the only thing that happened is that it couldn't keep track of time. So that might just be either bootleg cartridge or broken cartridge.
Watch full episodes of the Brewcast on the main YouTube channel, youtube.com/@brewfrasca.